So today we are talking about parenting styles and parenting values. So of course, people who are still really early on in their parenting journey, maybe this is something you've thought a lot about. Maybe it isn't something you've thought about at all. It's totally understandable. So hopefully it'll feel helpful to think through maybe what you've been doing thus far in your parenting journey, how you might want to change or stay the same moving forward. And then, as I mentioned, we'll do a small activity just about parenting values. You could use a piece of paper or a pen if you want, but of course, you can just jot a note down in your phone as well. So you don't need anything unless you have it, right nearby. All right. Thank you so much, few people, for sharing in the chat. So I'll share my slides and get started. As Savannah mentioned, my name is Campbell Cahill. I'm a licensed clinical social worker at Ardent Grove Foundation. We're a Denver-based therapy and assessment nonprofit. So I'll tell you a little bit more about us at the end. And I'm the infant and early childhood program director here at Ardent Grove. I work almost exclusively with pregnant and postpartum people and young children. So infant and early childhood age range. And I do work with a little bit older kids, like, up to 12. So this really is my niche here. So I'll share my slides, and I know sometimes it's hard or maybe it feels a little bit awkward, but I would love for this to be a conversation. If anybody ever has questions, feel free to unmute or, of course, use the chat function, which is sometimes a little more comfortable for people. I'll try to keep my eye on it. I would love for it to be, conversational or kind of question and answer, in addition, of course, to the information I want to share with you all. But let me just get my stuff situated here. Okay, great. So, as I mentioned, my name is Campbell Cahill. I am a licensed clinical social worker at Ardent Grove, and we will be exploring parenting styles today. So, we are going to focus on the four main types of parenting styles. The research that has been done on parenting styles has kind of identified these four as, the main categories that most people fall into one. And they've researched kind of the traits about each of these qualities and then the outcomes that it creates for children. So generally, each parent will fall into one of these categories, but sometimes you might take characteristics from another, or you might act in one way if you're really, exhausted or overwhelmed, but trying really hard to act, in a different way when you're feeling regulated. So it is something interesting to notice the traits you might pull from each category as well. So these next four slides are going to have a lot of information on them because I wanted to make sure to include, the traits, but then also the research, the evidence that's been shown on the outcomes for children, so that then you have it all in one place to see, okay, this parenting style, this is what it means, and this is kind of how it affects kids. So I know it's a lot to read, but it feels important to have all of this info here. So authoritarian parenting is where a parent establishes strict rules that the child obeys. They kind of call this one-way communication, right? The parent communicates to the child doesn't have a lot of say in whether they think it might be fair. This is definitely a because I said so type parent. There is often little to no room for negotiations from the child, and rules are not usually explained. Again, right? Like, why? Because I said so, not an explanation. Parents often expect their child to uphold these standards while making no errors. Mistakes generally lead to punishment. So it's this strictness or kind of this, focus on perfectionism rather than understanding that mistakes generally are a part of learning. Authoritarian parents are normally less nurturing and have high expectations with limited flexibility. As I mentioned, high expectations sort of perfectionism, right? So these are some of the traits. And then on the other column here, we see the research has shown that this parenting style leads to these certain outcomes for children. Children are often well behaved due to fear of consequences of misbehaving, right? So it's a good thing, I guess, for the children to be well behaved, but unfortunately, it is kind of like based in fear. Children may have higher levels of aggression, but also could be shy or socially inept and unable to make their own decisions because decisions have kind of been made for them. Children might have difficulty managing their anger. They might have low self-esteem, and strict parental rules and punishments often influence a child to rebel, right? Um, we might have seen that, either in ourselves or friends or something like that. I also forgot to mention as we go through these four styles, it could be interesting to reflect as you hear me talking about these rules or these outcomes, not only on how you want to parent, but maybe how you were parented, or if you have a partner, how they were parented, or if you have two children, right? What have you done thus far with your older that maybe you might want to make some changes or maybe don't make any changes, right? So it's just a lot to reflect on as we go through this. Okay, let me just make sure to check the chat. Of course, like I said, any questions, feel free to unmute or write them in the chat. So the next one, this is a little confusing, and this is why we're going to get to talking about something in a little bit that will kind of make sense. The next one is called authoritative, right? So we go back, authoritarian, authoritative. The words are so similar that people definitely get confused. Therefore, I don't know, I would assume maybe like 10 years ago, there was a little bit of a rebranding for authoritative parenting that people started calling gentle parenting. Now, gentle parenting maybe has tweaked a little to be the next one that we're going to talk about. It's a kind of a fine line, but ultimately, when people talk about gentle parenting, they mean this authoritative parenting. I think ultimately, like I said, the words were just so similar that they wanted to kind of give it a new name. The real, research has been done on using this word authoritative parenting, which are these qualities: having a close, nurturing relationship between parents and children, parents having clear guidelines for their expectations, and explaining their reasons associated with disciplinary actions. So we can see how this is already much different than the last one, right? The closeness, the explanations, the respect. Discipline used as support instead of punishment, right? So discipline actually means like teaching, right? So it doesn't always have to be like a punishment or bad consequence. It can be like a teaching moment. Children have input into the goals and expectations of the family. Like the child might say, like, I really want to stay up late on Friday night. And the parent might really listen to the child's reason for why. Frequent and appropriate levels of communication between the parent and the child. So you can see that this is much more communicative, open than the authoritarian style that we just looked at. The outcomes for children. So the research has shown that generally this parenting style leads to the healthiest outcomes for children, but it requires a lot of patience and effort from parents. So you might see that, right? Or hear that if you're talking about gentle parenting. It's a lot of work for parents to explain and understand than, a parent who's kind of a because I said so parent. Children are often confident, responsible, and able to self-regulate. This has been shown to have better social and emotional outcomes for children. Children can often accomplish their goals independently, and it leads to higher self-esteem. So obviously, this isn't, just for children. This is like for children who then grow up to be teens and adults, of course, right? These traits from the parenting style stick with them throughout their life. So they become adults with good regulation skills, high self-esteem, better social emotional outcomes. And of course, it's not always a perfect guarantee, but it does sound nice, right? We can see how there was a push for wanting people to know about this parenting style, wanting to know that this was something that led to really positive outcomes for kids. So they did, like I said, that little rebrand to call it gentle parenting instead of course, this authoritative name, which is a little too similar to the authoritarian name. All right, thoughts or questions? Okay, we'll move along. The next is permissive parenting. And so, just quickly before I dive in, I kind of alluded to there has been a little bit of confusion these days with what gentle parenting really is, right? I think some parents or some people misinterpret that it means being totally gentle all the time with your kids. And that's not actually what it is, right? That is actually a little bit more in this category of permissive. Um, Whereas the gentleness kind of comes from like the explanations or the communication and respect between the parent and the child, like we discussed on the last slide. So for permissive parenting, right, parents are really warm and really nurturing, but they often have minimal expectations or rules imposed on the child. The communication is open, but parents kind of allow children to like figure it out for themselves, right? Giving permission always just, oh, sure, yeah, sure, that's fine. Which doesn't actually create a lot of like structure or discipline for children, rare uses of discipline, right? And parents kind of acting more like a friend. This has been shown to have maybe unhealthy outcomes for children regarding things like snack, screen time, sleep, right? If the parents don't provide a lot of guidance on moderation, just, oh, sure, you can have the snack. Sure, you can stay on your tablet one more hour. The child might not realize that that's something, that might be negatively impacting them as well. Children usually have some self-esteem and decent social skills, right? Because they're like making a lot of choices for themselves. Maybe that builds some confidence for them. But it can also lead to impulsive, demanding, selfish, and lack of can lead to children being impulsive, demanding, selfish, and lacking in self-regulation skills because it's not necessarily something that was taught or supported by the parents in those moments. So you can see as you, whatever you know about gentle parenting, maybe you thought it was this, right? Being totally gentle. Maybe you knew it was the slide that we talked about earlier with a little more boundary and structure. So hopefully this is helping kind of understand these different styles and the outcomes for children. The last slide is quite obvious, right? But it is kind of important to notice that this is a parenting style that some people do use, being uninvolved, right? Children are given a lot of freedom, and the parent typically stays out of the way. Parents fulfill the child's basic needs, but remain detached from their child's life, right? So it might be like the child eats, of course, and sleeps, and has clean clothes, but there's not a lot of like emotional support or emotional, social emotional learning in the home. This parent probably does not utilize a particular disciplining style and has limited communication with their child. The parent often tends to offer little nurturing and have little to no expectations of their children. The outcomes for children usually are resilient or self-sufficient who were raised with this parenting style, but like out of necessity, right? Not necessarily for a good reason, but sort of as a way of like growing through these challenges. These children might have trouble controlling their emotions. They might have poor coping strategies, maybe academic challenges, and they might have difficulty maintaining or nurturing their social relationships or other relationships simply because that foundational relationship like also wasn't quite there. So again, as we explore these four, the traits, the outcomes, are there any thoughts or questions? Feel free to write them in the chat, like I said, and you don't have to share this if you don't want to, but maybe try to identify like how do you think you were parented? What would be your goal for um, parenting your family going forward? I'll keep my eye on the chat if there are ideas or questions to share. Okay, yeah. So Bertha's saying like there was a mix of all of them, like noticing maybe some of these traits in all. It definitely is possible. I think what we find and like maybe what the research, how they identified like parents to study is like what are they like most of the time? Like which category do they fall most into? And that would kind of be like how we would identify them. But you're right, it is possible that they take a trait from each, right? Like nobody falls perfectly into one category. Absolutely. That's sort of like I mentioned earlier. I think a lot of parents I work with talk about how in moments where they're feeling regulated, feeling good, feeling healthy, they can parent in the way that they really want to, or they're really trying to. But of course, moments when there's dysregulation or overwhelm or overstimulation, maybe they fall back into a, old pattern from their family that then sometimes feels like hard or frustrating. Any other thoughts to share? I'd love to hear people's ideas or questions, of course. Happy to answer them. Yeah, so someone noticing like raised in an authoritative household that because I said so, and wanting to strive for a more gentle parenting style, the um, authoritarian. Oh no, wait, hang on. Now I get confused. Authoritarian is the because I said so. So it you said you were raised in authoritative and want to do gentle parenting, which is actually the same thing. That's okay. No worries. Don't say sorry. This is why, like I said, I think there was this like rebrand because it is the words are so way too similar. But it sounds like you're saying you were raised in that because I said so, want to have more of that communication and respect in your life now. I think it's very common. Yes. Okay. Thanks so much for sharing to the people who did. I'll wait just, a minute more if there's any other thoughts or questions to share, then we'll move along. Okay. Okay. So again, these are some of the questions I actually already asked, but with curiosities of like, how do you define your parenting style? I know some people mentioned, they only have such a young child. Maybe you haven't figured it out yet. That's totally okay. But what might you strive for in the future? Or what has informed or changed your parenting style over the years for the few people that mentioned that, they have some older kids in addition to their infant? Maybe something has changed in those couple of years of parenting. Or how is your parenting style similar or different to how you were parented, which of course we reflected on a little. If anyone would want to share their responses to these questions, I'll keep my eye on the chat as well. All right. So, what we'll do now is our activity on values. So, here is a list of a couple of values. Of course, the last one is create your own. So, I want you to, like I said, either in your mind or, of course, on your phone or a piece of paper, take a minute to choose your top three values of this list. You have to pick only three. So, of course, you can create three of your own if you don't care for any of these, understandable. But I want each person to have three values identified. Again, like I said, I'll give us a minute and then we'll move on to the next step after that. If you want to share your top three in the chat, feel free, but you don't have to. Guess I should say as well, sometimes our parenting values might be different than just like our individual values. Often they're very similar, but it can be helpful in this context, since we're talking about parenting values, to think about specifically within parenting what three things from this list, including, of course, creating your own, are most important to you. So we'll take, 15 more seconds and then we'll move on to the second step. All right. So the next step is once you have your three identified, you have to pick number one. I know it's very challenging for people. We often don't like to pick like of our top three. Like it can be really hard to pick which number one, but it's really important to try. And sometimes we have a gut instinct and it's good to just go with that. So we'll take, again, maybe 30 seconds just to think on what your number one parenting value is. All right. And I know it's kind of challenging to do that, like I said, but if anyone feels comfortable sharing their number one parenting value, I'd love to hear it, either, of course, unmute or share in the chat. Someone shared integrity. Wonderful. Thanks so much. Did it feel easy or hard to kind of get to that number one? That one was easy. The rest were more difficult. Yeah. So some people write the number one is easy to identify, and two and three is actually more challenging. Oh, someone else shared compassion is really important to them. That's their number one. Awesome. And again, I guess the same question for you. Was it easy to pick that number one or was it hard? Hard to narrow them down. Yes, exactly. So some people feel like it's easy. Some people feel like it's really challenging to determine what feels most important to them. Okay. If anyone else is comfortable sharing, I'd love to hear. Those two were on the list. So I'm curious if anyone identified a value that, wasn't here. It was kind of create your own. All right. It's seeming like there's not much else to share. So we will move along, but I'll keep my eye on the chat, of course. So when we talk about values, especially within parenting, but of course within our everyday life as well, values help guide decisions about what is right and what is wrong. So these are again some questions. How do we identify our parenting or family values? How do these values that we identified, like integrity or compassion, relate to those different parenting styles we learned about before? How do your values align with your parenting style? Right? If you're someone who really valued communication, but you were finding yourself with that like authoritarian parenting style, that kind of because I said so, that might be something to notice, right? Like, oh, that actually isn't that aligned versus somebody who really valued, compassion or communication, having that gentle parenting style, that authoritative style, like that would kind of make sense, right? That feels pretty aligned. Somebody who, really cared about love and respect, but was maybe finding themselves doing that uninvolved parenting style, that might feel a little misaligned, right? It might be an indication to make a change if desired or find some more supports. Does anyone want to answer any of these questions in the chat or to share any other noticings? All right. I would really love to hear from you all, but it seems like this is a quiet group, so I understand and I respect that also. And I know some of you have some really little children, so it's understandable to feel like maybe it's hard to engage with this. Okay. Oh, so that's the end. Actually, we're a little bit early with our time, but here's my slide regarding the organization that I work for, Ardent Grove. So, Ardent Grove is a nonprofit, donor-funded mental health clinic. We offer low-cost and Medicaid therapy. We do assessment services, and then we provide community education. So, like something like this, partnering with Yana for these community education events. That's obviously part of our values and our mission as well. So there's this little QR code, of course, if you're interested in learning more about Ardent Grove, either, of course, we would appreciate some sort of donation, or if you're looking for a therapist to get involved with, please feel free to scan that QR, or, down here, you can contact us in these other ways as well. Um, and yeah, like I said, I'm pregnancy and postpartum therapist that works here at Arden Grove, but we have multiple other therapists who specialize in this as well. So we're always accepting new clients, and we have a really, really short wait list at this moment. So shouldn't be too long to get in if you or someone you know is looking for a therapist. Like I said, we accept Medicaid, we accept United, we accept Aetna. And then for all other insurances, we do essentially like a pay what you can sliding scale. So we have, kind of a top fee, but really anything below that, we try to accommodate. We really want to make sure that we feel accessible to people, which is why we come out to these community events as well, making sure that people are aware of our services. So, like I said, that is the end of my slides, but if anyone has questions, thoughts, I would love to hear more. And then, of course, if there's not much, I guess we'll just wrap a little early.
I have a question. So, what
Yeah,
if your parenting style differs quite a bit from your spouse? I mean, I've had friends. We only have a 3-week old, so I don't think I can really speak to any of this.
sure.
But we have friends, where it's evident that their parenting styles are quite divergent, and at times to me it looks like they're not really supportive of one another. I've seen that growing up too. Like, one parent sometimes can be the more lackadaisical one and the other one's the enforcer. So what can you do to overcome those dynamics?
Yeah, great question. I think you're right. I think it's very common. And I think something, of course, one of the simplest, but of course not actually simple at all, answer is to communicate about it, right? But in certain partnerships, of course, that's much more challenging than others. Trying to help each other, I think, see the goal, right? Or bringing, again, some of this research in could be helpful. I could see in some family systems, like, hey, there's research to show that this parenting style actually has the best outcomes for kids. And we would hope that a parent, who wanted the best for their child could then kind of make those changes. I think too, as we saw, there are there can be benefits or positive outcomes for each parenting style for children as well. So I think that's something to hold on to, right? Knowing that maybe the child would get benefits from each, and of course, sometimes challenges from each. But yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it ultimately probably comes down to communication within that partnership.
Great, thank you.
Yes, of course. Okay, Bertha asks, which parenting style has the best outcome? So that I'll go back. That's the authoritative parenting style, the one that now we call gentle parenting. The values of communication, of respect, clear boundaries, but also letting the child have some input into the expectations or goals in the family. This helps create children who are confident, responsible, able to self regulate. It often has better social and emotional outcomes for children, helps children have higher self esteem, and helps children be able to like accomplish their goals independently. So the research shows us that this style really does tend to have the best outcomes for kids. But as I mentioned here, I think it's really important to remember this requires a lot of patience and effort from parents. And sometimes parents just for whatever reason aren't able to like give all of that, right? They may be trying their best, but it takes a lot of work to really use this style like to the fullest. So that's why I say I think sometimes people borrow, pick and choose from different styles as well. This is really based on that foundation of like the nurturing, strong relationship between the parent and the child, and that mutual respect there. Great question. Who else has thoughts or questions or even just something to share, something maybe you noticed about yourself or your parenting values or style? Is it possible to get the recording? Yeah, I think Savannah would have info on that.
Yes, I these are all recorded and then they go, we have a a private YouTube channel for the parents in our group. So I'll make sure I send that link out. It does take me a couple of days to get this just edited and popped up on there, but I will definitely make sure that I get this up and sent over to you guys as soon as I can. And then I'll include Olive Campbell and Ardent Grove Foundation's contact information as well. So if you guys do have any questions, you'll be able to see all of that on the slide that she shared as well. But that way, if you guys would like to reach out to her directly, you will be able to.
Great. Yes, thanks so much for sharing it. I think hopefully your husband will also have some interesting noticings, or you guys can compare, as that other person shared before, about, do you have different or similar styles? It's a very interesting topic. All right. Other noticings, other questions? I really appreciate all of your time today. I know a lot of people have super young kids, so I know you guys are busy and tired, and I so appreciate you making time for this. Oh, thank you. All right. The only other thing I wanted to ask about is so Ardent Grove and Yana are now kind of like partnering that I'm gonna do these webinars probably like once a quarter. So like, in 2026, my plan is to do four of them. I would love if anybody has ideas for topics that you really want to hear about or learn more about. I'd love to take, some ideas from you all to tailor these webinars to really fit your needs. So if anybody has topics, just write them in the chat and I'll write them down and maybe you'll see them coming sometime next year. Okay, no problem. I'll plan to see you all hopefully in 2026. I really appreciate your time today. As I said, I know you all are busy and tired. I'm so grateful for you making the time to come and chat about parenting styles and values. All
Perfect. Yeah,
right.
and if anyone thinks of a topic, you're always welcome to reach out. Oh, there we go. Looks
Oh,
like
yay.
an
Great,
iPhone.
Rose.
I'm sure that's not your name. Had an idea. And if anyone else thinks of anything just later on, again, feel free to reach out to Campbell or me, and I can always send that over to her as well. But I think that's a great idea, crowdsourcing some ideas. What's on our mind most. So love that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure these, webinars feel important for you, right? That like you want to come and there are topics that matter to you. So thanks so much for sharing that idea. And yes, any other ideas, feel free to share as well. Hopefully we can collaborate. And I look forward to maybe seeing you all at some webinars in the future. All right. Thank you so
Perfect.
much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you everyone for